Welcome to Moonbeaming, a podcast about lunar living, magic, creativity, tarot, and more. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and I'm so honored and excited to be here with you today. Hello, and welcome back to Moonbeaming, a podcast where we explore life through a curious, spiritual, and often magical lens. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, author of The Moon Book. I run a business called The Moon Studio, where I teach and create beautiful products and write and do a lot of other stuff. TBD, too much to name here. I'm really glad you're here. Happy new moon, everyone. I hope this new cycle brings you many insights and blessings. And most importantly, I hope it spurs you on. I hope it encourages you. I hope it cheerleads you to try and take some different actions around some desire or yearning or pleasure that is ready to be invested in. I am, as always, really excited to get into this week's episode because today we're talking about magical practices and concepts and sprinkling in some discoveries from neuroscience that back them. This is a common occurrence that I notice, which is that science comes to a lot of the same conclusions around practices or beliefs that witches or spiritualists have known about and practiced often for thousands of years. Not just science, also psychology and other healing arts as well. And to be clear, I am totally pro-science and I am pro-magic. We're always about the both and over here. And any good occultist or scientist knows that they both stem from the same source. And as far as I know, in the West, a long time ago, and for a long time, they were interchangeable. We know that there was the study of alchemy that ended up splitting off into the science side and then the magic side. We also know that what we might call, out there, woo-woo, we know that some pretty normative institutions invest in some unexpected practices. We know that the U.S. government sponsors psychic experiments for military use so that military personnel can psychically look for enemies, but the government calls that remote viewing instead of using your intuition or psychic abilities. So we could go down a wormhole. We're not going to go down a wormhole. No worms, no rabbits today. I'll keep it moving, but I could be here for a long time about this topic. And lately I've been listening to the Huberman Lab podcast that's hosted by a Stanford scientist. And a lot of the practices that he investigates through the lens of science, such as visualization, breath work, cold exposure, and shockingly, even starting off the day with some sunshine, these also correspond to practices that, again, spiritualists, witches, yogis have known about and have been practicing for ages. What I'm trying to say is, if it works for you, use it. You don't have to need a reason. This is why often I'm not interested in trying to prove or explain some of the practices that have changed my life. I get to use them, experience, and enjoy them. And if you're into it, awesome. If you're not, totally cool. I respect that as well. One of the tools I love are archetypes and avatars. I love working with archetypes in order to create breakthroughs, affirmations of where I am now and where I'm headed. And I also think that these are imaginal techniques to help us imagine ourselves, imagine our lives differently. Archetypes are all around us. We see them, of course, in tarot. We also see them in deities, in astrology, in popular culture, in movies, and all other media. These are symbols of energies, concepts, ideas that generally we collectively understand and connect to on a visceral level, beyond language, often quite intimately. There could be an innate connection and understanding there, wonder, maybe even sometimes some intimidation. I think about the cards in the tarot that you just get. You pull it and you're like, yep, I get this card. Maybe you can't even completely, clearly, or succinctly explain their meaning to someone else because that meaning might reside in your heart, might reside in your body. Maybe it's the hermit and you're like, well, this just feels like me. I have been here. This is often how I relate to my life or the world. And hermit type figures in popular media like Yoda, and hermit type activities like meditation and turning inward just vibe with you. And even when you don't relate to them, that's still information. I've had folks taking my classes tell me they don't get or understand some of the cards in the tarot. And I always answer, well, of course you don't. I mean, I don't even. There are like a good probably 5 to 7 cards in the tarot deck I don't really get on that visceral, somatic level. And a few I totally get, but I really don't like. And that is completely normal because, again, there are 78 of them. In a crowd full of 78 people, would you love, understand, and want to hang out with every single one of them? Of course not. Well, if you would, you're a much better person than me, all right? So, good on you. Good on you. And of course, there are way more archetypes outside of the tarot that exist. Part of the fun is creating your own archetypes. And I always suggest folks who are into archetypes, into the tarot, do. In my upcoming class series, Resourcing the Creative Self, this is what we do in the first class for the first week. We create an artistic vision board of ourselves, our inner flame, our creativity, and for our creative process to guide us. And within that, there are colors and plants and art and artists we love. There are tarot card archetypes or planets we wish to summon or collaborate with, and so on. It's a super fun start. to a process, and I suggest you create one for yourself if you feel called, which is a very new moon activity to do, is it not? So, this mood board is a grouping of these visual symbols, these sigils. So, it's meant to serve as both mirror and spell, a kind of collection of our inspiration, what we love, what we relate to, that serves as both an affirmation and a snapshot of where we are right now energetically, vision wise, as well as being a type of energetic guide to help us get to where we're going, which, of course, are what archetypes are. These are ways that we use the tarot, of course. The other thing I really love about this exercise is that simply making it is a creative act. It's a generative act designed to get your inspiration flowing, as well as being a map that is filled with suggestions around what sorts of actions to take, what kinds of colors or moods to bring into your art, and what aesthetic in general you're ready to explore through your art. I encourage folks to not only bring in tarot cards and artists they like and elements and words, but also to think about the best environments that you make your art in. Like, do you need tons of books around you and a ton of Post-it notes that you can just scribble, scrabble, rabble, dabble? Or do you need a spare, quiet space? Do you need candles around you? Do you need to be in the dark? Or do you need a lot of light and lots of plants around you? Like, what do you need in order to feel good and safe environmentally in your process? And also, what do you need to help get you into your practice? You might want to spend some time thinking about that if you felt stuck or it's been hard for you to connect to your inner spark, your inner flame, your inner inspiration. Maybe it's time to tend to the environment you make work in. Even just rearranging a few things or getting rid of some clutter, going through some paperwork on your desk might change things up. One concrete way that archetypes can help us transform is by picking one or two or three and then adapting to that archetype's behavior. You can do that mood board of who the next version of you is going to be. And then you can play around with bringing that energy into your being through color, accessories, even sometimes smell, even perfume or hairstyle. You can create an altar to your next version of yourself, or the spirit of your creativity, or the spirit of your artistic self. And throughout the day and night, you can ask yourself, okay, well, if I'm the high priestess, if I'm behaving as the high priestess, how would I respond to that weird comment from that acquaintance? Gentle listener, the high priestess would probably not give a flying F. She'd probably keep it moving because she's got some important stuff to do. She'd probably be able to see where she is about to get triggered due to some childhood stuff. She'd probably be able to de-escalate her nervous system, maybe go into a brief meditation and focus back on her intuition and what she needed to do next. And spoiler alert, archetypes are you. Avatars are you, because They come from you. You're choosing them. You're making a conscious choice to align yourself with a particular energy. It's an aspect of yourself you're ready to explore. You're ready to put the focus on for a while in order to integrate, in order to heal. Your imagination and your intuition grant you the tools to solve certain problems and give you solutions. So let that nonlinear, magical part of your psyche help you. Archetypal anchors really help us with transformation and shifts because when we want to change, it can be really hard to do so because we don't always have a mirror into the future, right? We can't always clearly see our future self. And because we're in process, because so much of what we are focusing on is inside of us, is a vision, we don't have tangible affirmation other than a feeling or sensation, which of course is very tangible, but humans love to see things externally. We love results. We've been trained to want tangible results. So while we're in process, often we don't have anchors saying, okay, now I'm an artist, or now I'm a witch, or now I am someone with incredible boundaries, or someone who is dedicated to community, whatever it is, whatever you're stating. Yeah, it sounds amazing. It sounds so good. Who wouldn't want to be that? And absolutely writing down your intentions, who you'd like to be, who you feel yourself becoming, totally works. That's why keeping journals and grimoires are a really, really encouraged practice in witchcraft. But claiming a new identity or a new aspect of yourself that you'd like to bring forth can be really daunting. Like if it were easy for me to be this person by now, don't you think I would have already been her? You know? It can also be especially daunting to stick with our practice or with the habits that we attach to these different identities. We usually need support, and that's often why community-based groups or 12-step programs or memberships or churches or whatever else are so effective, right? We usually need like-minded mirrors and like-minded support. I also think, seeing ourselves as in relationship to others, whether it be through lineage or artistic elders or as being part of a constellation, like, are you in a craft constellation of people who are weavers, people who are cross stitchers? I'm trying to think of different crafts, or jewelry makers, or whatever that might be. Is that going to make it easier for you to proceed? But quite frankly, for a lot of us, we don't have that community, or we're not comfortable joining a membership group or something like that. And so that's where archetypes and archetypal anchors can come in. You can claim your identity through the archetypes, right? Because archetypes are so powerful in part because they exist at the level of collective consciousness. And choosing archetypes to help guide you and exploring and exploring and living these archetypes will guide you into your next chapter or iteration more quickly. Gather a family tree of artists you are indebted to and inspired by. This also helps give what you are creating context. It keeps you in dialogue with a bigger picture and part of a bigger picture. And bigger pictures are what our purposes need. That's what makes them fun. That's what turns them into adventures. That's what situates us in the larger story of existence. Like I said, in Resourcing the Creative Self, we talk about archetypes beyond the tarot and beyond the core 12 Jungian archetypes that are often used when we're talking about archetypes. I bring in the work of Carolyn Meese, who has a list of over probably 100 archetypes, I think. A very extensive list. That's definitely a place to explore. You can Google it. We'll put that link in the show notes. And of course, I encourage folks to create their own. One past student had the archetype of the librarian. I really love that one. So maybe picking a couple of archetypes that are made up from your imagination might be easier for you if picking just a couple of archetypes that other people have come up with are difficult for you, right? Maybe you create one for yourself. If picking a couple of tarot cards are difficult for you, maybe you need to create your own. The official definition of an avatar is an incarnation in human form or an embodiment of a philosophy or concept. So I feel like archetypes and avatars are basically the same thing. I'm pretty much using those terms interchangeably, though there's a kind of unconscious or submerged aspect to the archetype, I feel, where there is this ancient image or energy inherited from, earliest consciousness, our earliest human ancestors that is supposedly still present in the collective unconscious and conscious, which of course makes them so powerful. It's that collectiveness. It's that lineage. It's I've said this before a lot, like I just got to bring it in, planets as ancestors, because our literal ancestors, our artistic ancestors, our spiritual ancestors were all looking at the exact same planet, the exact same Venus, the exact same sun, moon, stars, plants, so on. So there is this real awe in avatars, in archetypes, which makes them so powerful. I also feel like the word avatar, with its associations to tech and to online handles, our projected image, it feels very current, super modern, as well as aspirational and future oriented. So I love this ancient future vibe that working with both archetypes and avatars can give us, and both archetypes and avatars can evolve, right? And both reference collective concepts as well as potentially being open to new interpretations of these concepts. So I wanted to bring in a little bit of science that I found in my research, and I've really found it fascinating as an added benefit to this practice. It's cool that there's some scientific backing. And I found this phenomenon, I guess. It's not a phenomenon, though, if it's a scientifically proven concept. At any rate, it's called the Batman effect. And it is a cognitive strategy that can help move us forward with confidence as we stay in challenging situations with our new identity being the leader through the change. It could also be a strategy we can use to help get us out of the amygdala and into the frontal cortex. Now, really, really quickly, the amygdala is a part of our brain where the fight, flight, freeze trauma responses live. And I have talked so much about this in the last class that I taught, but I'm not going to get too into it. But often in folks who've experienced trauma, the amygdala is not only larger and it's a more practiced muscle, but it is often where we might go to in times of stress or in times of challenge. And the frontal cortex is a part of our brain that is responsible for logic and more executive functioning. So the analogy that I used when I was teaching Better Boundaries and talking about this is that let's just say you're in your bedroom alone and you see some kind of shadow on the wall. And for a moment, you're like, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is that? That shadow looks like a person or, a werewolf or whatever coming to get me. And you go into a nervous system response that is dysregulated. That is most likely your amygdala popping off. That moment when you take a breath and you realize it's just your bunny rabbit stuffed animal sitting on your chair and it's the shadow. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm safe. It's just my stuffed animal. Maybe I'll bring him into my bed or whatever. That's your frontal cortex. Now, the frontal cortex also has been thought of as the center of creativity because it seems to be responsible for a lot of the activities that contribute to creative thinking, such as our working memory, such as, our logic brain that helps us figure out strategies or figure out solutions. So on that thread, doing things that stimulate our imagination, archetypal work, creative work, learning new skills, journaling, daydreaming, so on and so forth, they help to support the healing process. And we see people doing this all the time, having alter egos. David Bowie was sort of the master of this. We see Beyonce as Sasha Fierce. We will often see performers have a whole new look, persona that comes with a whole new record or body of work. So we imagine ourselves as someone else or as a different version of ourselves. I'm thinking of, I just saw the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. Have you seen it? That's a really interesting play on avatars and the multiverse where people are all different kinds of versions of themselves on all different kinds of timelines. It's really kind of wild. And in Better Boundaries, I wove together a lot of stuff. I talked about boundaries, but I also talked about being highly sensitive. I talked about parentified children. I brought in different attachment styles because I think all of these concepts are really important for healing. And if you want to know about more of these, you can Google it. And I also have a whole episode on highly sensitives and boundaries this season, so you can look at that. And I go over all those things in much detail in my Better Boundaries class, but I wanted to just share for those of us who are highly sensitives, creating an avatar of our future self or our creative self or our higher self and utilizing them as a compass and as an anchor and as an instigator for change and through change is really useful for us, because most highly sensitives naturally or sort of have been programmed as a coping mechanism will attune to anything other than themselves. They'll attune to someone else. And so it might be easier to focus on another version of ourselves who can then guide us and we can be in dialogue with us. This also dovetails with this idea I talk about a lot of the future you, this wise elder future version of yourself who has made it through the transformation, who has made it through the challenge and knows more and can advise you from that wise place. So you can also think of that archetype as an aspect of you who wants to help and support you. I talk about this concept a lot of our future self giving us guidance and our present self being able to heal our past self, right? Time isn't linear. We can go timeline jumping between our past self to our future self to our present self. So I won't get too much into it here, but you can think of that archetype as another version of you who has transformed and has all of this wise counsel to give you. So maybe it's time to adopt a persona, an anchor, a North Star to use in your creative practice or your magical practice, or if you want to pivot in your business. I've been working on a bunch of pivots and I'm definitely playing with mood boards and with different archetypes. So think about what you are ready to embody and who you would like to become, and either join us in class or on your own, create a mood board for your next self or your artist self. This is this avatar, this persona you can adopt to serve as both anchor and North Star. So who do you want to be for the rest of this summer, the fall season? What's going to help you finish out the rest of the year in integrity? Like, what's the vibe? Are you a poet, an introspective wordsmith, reaching into the depths of your soul to bring forth intense truths for the collective? Are you ready to be seen more? Are you ready to show yourself more? What would that look like? What parts of yourself are you ready to show? Do you want it to be on stage? Do you want it to be for a large audience? What would you dress like? What would your routines look like? And then begin to integrate those ideas into the energetic and into the physical. If these kinds of discussions and themes and topics and practices are fascinating to you and you want to go deeper and you want to see what persona, what archetypes are waiting for you, I invite you to enroll in Resourcing the Creative Self. It starts in 1 month. It runs for just under 1 month, and we would love to have you. You have a beautiful community. We have weekly classes. There is homework that you can do or not do. We have guest teachers. It's a really, really, really cool time. And for all of you listening who are just ready to get started on some potent, creative, archetypal work, start thinking about what you would like to step into, what energies you'd like to be your guide, and make a mood board. Create your altar for this. Pick an archetype, an avatar that you'd like to embody. Have fun and happy new moon, everyone. Until soon, be good to yourself and to others. Bye for now. Moonbeaming is brought to you by the Moon Studio. It is created and hosted by me, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. It is edited by Rose Blakelock with a lot of additional help from Hazel Frew. It is supported by our beautiful patrons, which you can join over at patreon.com, The Moon Studio. If you would like to further support the podcast, you can sign up for a sponsorship. You can rate and review it or share it with your friends or on your social media. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you so much.